The story begins with a grand, sweeping view of a prestigious institution, an architectural marvel of stone and prestige known as St. Bridden Academy. This is a place of learning, but for Lady Sylvia Waterford, a daughter of a marquis, it serves a far more utilitarian purpose. Sylvia stands amidst the towering structures, her expression focused and calculating, ignoring the grandeur of the chapel hospital nearby to fixate on her true objective. She acknowledges that this is not the time for distractions. She is here with a singular, predatory goal. Sylvia possesses a secret that sets her apart from her peers. She retains the complete memories of her past life, and those memories fuel her ambition to find a man she can completely dominate and control. The story plunges 2 centuries into the past, into the dark recesses of Sylvia's previous incarnation. In that life, she was a woman of common birth, plucked from obscurity by a king to become a rags-to-riches queen. Far from a fairy tale, her existence was a wretched isolation within the cold, unforgiving walls of the palace. She was surrounded by mockery, with nobles snickering behind their fans, questioning her manners and worthiness. The memory shifts to a harrowing climax, a scene of betrayal and injustice. The former queen stands accused, screaming her innocence to a heartless court, denying charges of adultery and declaring she has no need for the man condemning her. Her pleas fall on deaf ears. Her own child calls out to her, confused and helpless, while the queen points out the hypocrisy of the king, who was the one actually engaging in affairs. The gavel falls with a brutal command, "Execute her." Her desperate attempts to speak to her king are silenced, cut short by the finality of death. This tragic first life ended in disgrace and blood, but death was not the end. Sylvia's consciousness returned in her new life when she was merely 3 years old, bringing with it 2 crystallized resolutions forged in the fires of her execution. The first was a vow of ruthlessness. She would trample on and utilize anyone beneath her station for her own benefit. She resolved to become a villainess if necessary. The second resolution was born of her marital trauma. She determined she was done climbing the social ladder through matrimony. Marrying a powerful man in her past life had only resulted in her being tossed around by his whims until he eventually took her life. Fate, however, dealt her a fortunate hand this time. She was born into a pretty good family, granting her the status she previously lacked. Yet, as a noblewoman, the societal obligation of marriage remains unavoidable. Therefore, Sylvia formulated a new strategy for this existence. She would never marry a man who held a status above her own. Instead, she plans to leverage her family's immense prestige to find a partner she can keep firmly under her heel, ensuring she never again holds the weaker hand. St. Bridden Academy is the hunting ground where she intends to execute this plan. The scene shifts to the Academy's social environment, where Sylvia navigates a circle of smiling, blushing noble girls. They propose dropping honorifics to foster intimacy, a suggestion Sylvia outwardly accepts with a radiant, practiced smile, agreeing that it aligns with the Academy's motto of equality. Internally, however, her assessment is scathing. She views the dormitory life as an opportunity to analyze their personalities, dismissing her peers as sitting ducks, before correcting herself to the slightly more charitable, fine gentlemen. Compared to the cutthroat nature of high society, she finds the Academy population hopelessly naive. The other girls, oblivious to Sylvia's internal monologue, gossip about romance, blushing at the prospect of meeting men and getting married. One girl dreams of getting close to His Highness, the prince, hoping for a fairy tale romance. Sylvia watches them, her expression distinct from their flustered excitement, finding the informality of their girl talk nerve-wracking in its triviality. The conversation turns to history, specifically the scandal of the king who married a commoner 200 years ago, Sylvia's own tragic past. The girls discuss it with a mix of disdain and curiosity, calling the union disrespectful and noting the commoner queen was executed. Sylvia stands silently, the subject of their gossip being her own traumatic death, trying to suppress the dark memories. The chatter shifts to the present curiosity. The crown prince is enrolling this year. Rumors abound that he was a sickly recluse, holed up in the palace and unable to attend royal events. The students are surprised he is attending at all. For Sylvia, this news is a warning. Her strategy is simple: avoid the prince at all costs. She retreats to the dormitory, steeling herself to stay away from royalty, reaffirming that she would never choose a man who outranks her. The type of man she desires, a submissive puppet, would be nowhere near the crown prince's circle. Sylvia's domestic situation is then revealed through a flashback involving her father and a stern-looking maid. Her father, concerned about the family reputation, assigned this strict woman to accompany Sylvia as a servant. He warned Sylvia that failure due to frivolous romance would disgrace the family and impact his work. He essentially placed a handler on her to ensure she focuses on finding a suitable, strategic husband. However, Sylvia, operating with the cunning of a woman who has lived 2 centuries, turns the tables. She tells the maid that when her services aren't needed, she is free to do as she pleases, a move calculated to win the woman over. In the carriage, the dynamic plays out. The maid, rigid and professional, dismisses the idea of sightseeing in the noble district, claiming she has no time for leisure and intends to return to the estate. Sylvia, however, traps her with kindness. She points out the chapel hospital they passed and suggests the maid visit her hospitalized mother there. The maid is stunned, wondering how Sylvia knew about her personal tragedy. Sylvia internally gloats, revealing her method. She keeps comprehensive information on all her servants and uses their misfortunes to secure leverage under the guise of benevolence. She had even paid off the maid's brother's debts, securing the woman's absolute loyalty and gratitude. Sylvia acknowledges her own terrible nature, admitting she secures power by collecting weak points, though she hadn't planned to cash in this favor so soon. Sylvia walks through the academy grounds, self-deprecatingly calling herself a narcissist, when the tranquility is shattered by a rustling sound from above. Suddenly, a male figure plummets from the trees, crashing to the ground in a shower of leaves and petals directly in front of her. Sylvia recoils, shrieking in shock as the boy lands in a heap. The boy, a blonde-haired youth with a disheveled appearance, sits up, equally confused. He immediately launches into a frantic apology, claiming he didn't realize anyone was there and that he almost died again. Sylvia stares at him, her mind blank, assessing this chaotic individual. He dusts himself off, casual to the point of rudeness, and brushes petals from his hair. He seems more concerned about the entrance ceremony than the fact that he just fell from a tree, muttering about being late. Sylvia watches him, incredulous, noting that he jumped from tree to tree like a wild animal. She calls out to him, questioning his behavior, thinking it entirely improper for a noble. The boy laughs it off awkwardly, scratching his head. Sylvia analyzes his appearance. His clothes are simple, suggesting a lower rank, perhaps a viscount. She wonders if he is a commoner or a new student ignorant of noble manners. This lack of refinement strikes a chord with her. It reminds her of her own past life when she was the ignorant commoner queen who didn't know the rules. Driven by a strange impulse, she approaches him. She fixes his collar, admonishing him that looking pathetic will only invite others to walk all over him. She warns him that the school is a battlefield and that with so many nobles present, his current attitude will be his undoing. She frames this intimacy as a little favor, stepping into the role of a mentor momentarily before walking away, leaving the boy stunned and staring at her retreating back. The narrative moves to the grand hall for the entrance ceremony. The atmosphere is electric with anticipation. The freshman representative is announced, Leon Fitzpatrick. The crowd gasps as the prince steps forward. He is a striking figure with dark hair, a sharp gaze, and a powerful build that contradicts the rumors of his frailty. The students erupt in whispers, swooning over his height, his muscles, and his dreamy appearance. The prince addresses the crowd, vowing to push himself harder and asking for their support, his voice commanding silence and respect. Sylvia watches him with dead, uninterested eyes. While the other girls are squealing and flushing crimson, discussing his physique and how he bulked up, Sylvia remains completely flat. Her friends notice her lack of reaction, teasing her about her trauma regarding high-ranking men. They ask if she has met him before or if she's a potential fiancé, but Sylvia vehemently denies it, reiterating that his high rank is terrifying to her and she would turn him down instantly. To her, he represents the very power structure she intends to avoid. As the girls continue their gossip in the hallway, they spot the prince again. This time, he is not alone. Standing behind the dark-haired prince is the blonde boy who fell from the tree. The girls immediately identify him, and their tone changes from adoration to mockery. They identify the blonde boy as Conrad Shreve, the third son of a viscount. Despite his low rank, he is the late queen's cousin and serves as the prince's childhood playmate. The girls cruelly label him His Highness's little lapdog. Sylvia observes the interaction between the two young men. Conrad appears to be apologizing profusely to the prince, bowing his head in subservience. The prince asks Conrad for his opinion on the kingdom's economy, and Conrad stammers, blushing, offering a safe, sycophantic agreement that the prince is absolutely right. The prince smiles, accepting this non-answer, noting that Conrad knows how to watch the people around him. The dynamic seems clear to everyone: a dominant, brilliant prince and his weak, yes-man attendant. However, for Sylvia, this pathetic display is a revelation. She looks at Conrad, flustered, submissive, and cowering behind the prince, and sees perfection. Sparkles of opportunity virtually surround her vision of him. He fits her requirements exactly. He is of lower rank, a viscount's third son. He is clearly easily intimidated, and yet he possesses valuable connections to royalty. He is a man she can keep firmly under her thumb. Sylvia constructs a new plan instantly. She predicts that Conrad, with his clumsy demeanor, will likely be dismissed as the prince's aide soon. When that happens, she will be there to scoop him up. By marrying him, she can use her family's connections to get him a job, making it a good deal for him as well. Crucially, a man fired from the prince's service would be socially vulnerable, making it impossible for him to ever stand up to her. She feels a twinge of guilt for wishing misfortune on him, acknowledging she is a terrible woman, but the prize is too good to ignore. She makes her move immediately. Feigning concern, she approaches the pair, asking Conrad if he has a cold, using the chill she felt as a pretext to initiate contact. She views this as doing him a favor, just as she did with her servants, planting the seeds of future leverage. The narrative briefly cuts away to a conversation between Sylvia's parents, or perhaps a memory of them, discussing her strange nature. They note that she was always an odd child, more interested in the bloody histories of executed queens than fairy tales. They worry about her, hoping she might fall in love and be a normal girl, unaware of the calculated game she is playing. The perspective then shifts to a private chamber where the dark-haired prince and the blonde Conrad are alone. The dynamic instantly inverts. The blonde boy, previously stuttering and clumsy, now wears a calm, sophisticated expression. He addresses the dark-haired boy as Conrad. The dark-haired boy, the one the world believes is the prince, responds with deference, saying it is an honor to be chosen for this role. The truth is revealed. They have switched places. The blonde boy, the one who fell from the tree, the one Sylvia dismissed as a pathetic lapdog, is the real Prince Leon. The dark-haired boy is the real Conrad, acting as a decoy and bodyguard. The real Prince Leon is using this disguise to observe the students authentically. He reflects on the girl he met in the garden, Sylvia, and smiles, intrigued. He tells the real Conrad that the switch was worth it just to meet such an interesting girl. Prince Leon, now posing as the attendant, admits he feels a little bad for the deception but finds the role of an attendant surprisingly comfortable. As Sylvia walks down the hallway, confident in her plan to manipulate the weak Conrad, she passes the real prince. He watches her with a hidden, knowing gaze, mentally calling her, "my sweet Conrad," likely a translation quirk, or he is amused she is targeting his decoy, or referring to her attraction to the role he is playing. Sylvia offers a polite good day, completely unaware that this sitting duck she plans to hunt is actually the apex predator of the kingdom, and that she has walked directly into the gaze of the very man she swore to avoid. The hallway echoes with the imperious commands of the young man acting the part of the crown prince, who thrusts a sheathed blade toward his blonde attendant. He demands that the lapdog carry his sword as well, adding a layer of humiliation to the burden. The blonde youth, outwardly known as Conrad Shreve but in reality Prince Leon, accepts the weapon with a submissive wobble, playing his role of the clumsy servant to perfection. Onlookers whisper about his pathetic nature, noting how he cannot even talk back to the prince he serves, finding his lack of spine unbelievable for a noble of his station. Sylvia Waterford watches this display from a distance, her eyes narrowing not with disgust, but with calculation. She observes the wobbly demeanor of Lord Conrad and mentally notes that the prince will likely berate him later. Sylvia's internal monologue reveals a twisted delight at this sight. To her, Lord Conrad's weakness is absolute perfection. She swoons internally, not out of romantic affection, but because he represents the ideal candidate for her machinations. A man she can keep firmly under her heel. Her mind flashes back to the trauma of her previous life, where she was executed by a tyrannical husband. To avoid repeating that tragedy, she swore a solemn vow that if she ever married again, it would be to someone beneath her marquis house in rank. Lord Conrad fits every criterion, a lower-ranking viscount, socially vulnerable, and possessing exactly the submissive temperament she requires to ensure her own safety and dominance. Later, Sylvia spots her target walking alone through the academy's corridors. She deduces he is heading to the outdoor training grounds, noting the armor and swords he struggles to carry. She seizes this moment as a prime opportunity to close the distance between them. Upon arriving at the training grounds, she finds him alone amidst the trees, swinging a sword with surprising intensity. The blonde youth grips the hilt, his expression focused and sharp, a stark contrast to his earlier clumsiness. However, the moment he notices Sylvia's presence, the mask of competence slips back on. He flinches and drops the practice swords with a loud clatter, reverting to the jittery Conrad. He apologizes profusely for the unsightly display, explaining he was merely using his free time to practice. Sylvia, undeterred by his awkwardness, sees an opening. She steps forward, offering to help him carry the equipment, framing it as a chance to foster intimacy. As they walk together through the dappled sunlight of the academy grounds, she glances up at him, surprised by his height now that she is standing close. He politely refuses her help, insisting that he cannot allow a marquis's daughter to perform manual labor, stating it is far too much for a lady. He then pivots the conversation, apologizing for the incident where he fell from the tree, and confirms her identity as Lady Sylvia Waterford. Sylvia counters his politeness with a direct acknowledgement of his reputation, noting that he is quite famous himself as Lord Conrad Shreve. When she mentions the derogatory moniker, lapdog, he pauses, a shadow crossing his face, before accepting the title with a self-deprecating smile. He admits that if that is what people call him, the least he can do is be useful in that role. Sylvia, however, is looking deeper. She fixates on his hands, observing that they are covered in calluses, evidence of hard work and dedication that contradicts his reputation as a mere sycophant. She realizes he is trying incredibly hard, despite the mockery. Attempting to execute a classic romantic trope from her previous life's memories, Sylvia feigns a stumble, flopping onto the ground in hopes of being caught or fussed over. She laments internally that her get-clothes plan is failing to produce the desired cinematic result. The reality of having a man carry luggage for her does not make her heart flutter as it did in her past life. Instead, she finds the process harder than anticipated. She chides herself for conveniently forgetting that her previous romantic road ended in execution, realizing that panic is the natural reaction when someone important suddenly engages with you. She decides that for a first attempt, this interaction is good enough, and suspects she may have approached the situation backward. In the lecture hall, the lesson continues, but Sylvia's attention is entirely focused on plotting her future. She observes the back of Conrad's head, calculating that she is the only one who truly understands the lesson of survival and strategy. She refines her plan. She will continue to close the distance steadily, and when Lord Conrad inevitably gets fired from his position as the prince's aide, she will swoop in. She envisions a future where she forces a worn-out Conrad to sign a marriage contract, securing her safety. Her scheming is interrupted by a commotion as students rush to the windows, crying out that His Highness is outside. The courtyard below becomes a stage for the prince, the decoy Conrad, to display his martial prowess. Students flock to watch him practice swordsmanship, but Sylvia recoils, her trauma from her past life screaming at her to avoid royalty at all costs. She tries to retreat, but her friends drag her along, insisting that everyone is going to watch. Sylvia realizes with dread that where the prince goes, Lord Conrad must follow, meaning she cannot ignore the prince if she wants to pursue her target. She grumbles internally, caught between her ambition and her fear. On the training field, the decoy prince stands triumphant over his opponent, the real prince disguised as Conrad. The decoy accepts the surrender of his aide, while the crowd of noble girls squeals in admiration of His Highness's skill. Sylvia, however, sees something different. She stares intently at the scene, noting that while the crowd is mesmerized by the prince, the loser, on the ground displayed a form that was clean and precise. She recalls the calluses on his hands and the secret practice session she witnessed, realizing the immense effort he puts into his swordsmanship. Without thinking, she breaks the unspoken social code and shouts words of encouragement not to the victor, but to the defeated. "Lord Conrad, you can do it." The outburst freezes the training ground. The decoy prince stares in shock, and the real prince, Leon, looks up from the ground, his eyes wide with genuine surprise. The silence is deafening as Sylvia realizes she has cheered for the wrong person, making it look like she wanted the prince's aide to win against the prince himself. She panics, acknowledging she screwed up. Her friends ask if she was cheering, and Sylvia hastily tries to cover her tracks, stammering that it is rude for ladies to only cheer for one side and that she was merely being polite. Her attempt at damage control runs straight into Lady Gloriana of House Abridge, a high-ranking noble with ambitious curls and a fan to match. Gloriana confronts Sylvia, expressing disbelief that a marquis's daughter would lower herself to flirt with a lapdog. She lectures Sylvia on the importance of social associations, stating that choosing who one hangs out with is part of a noble's job. Sylvia, attempting to diffuse the tension, claims she was just startled and bumped into Gloriana, but Gloriana sees through the clumsy excuse. The confrontation reveals a critical piece of information. Lady Gloriana has set her sights on becoming the prince's bride. Sylvia's internal reaction is one of immense relief rather than jealousy. She learns that Gloriana views her as a rival due to the Waterford house's long-standing status, which technically makes Sylvia a closer match for the prince. Sylvia mentally pleads for Gloriana to take the prince off her hands, having absolutely no desire to contend for that dangerous position. Later, as the group moves to a different location, the decoy prince, Conrad, stops to address Sylvia directly. He wipes sweat from his brow, looking every bit the dashing royal, and asks if she was the one cheering for Conrad earlier. Sylvia stammers, terrified that the prince is speaking to her, and offers a weak explanation that she had spoken to Lord Conrad previously. The decoy prince smiles and calls her gesture beautiful, causing the surrounding girls to erupt in whispers. They gossip that His Highness has taken a liking to Lady Sylvia, interpreting the interaction as a sign of royal favor. Sylvia is horrified. She feels she has only succeeded in distracting Lord Conrad and drawing the unwanted gaze of the royal family. She vehemently denies any romantic interest to her friends, citing her trauma, though she cannot explain the source of her fear to them. However, as she watches the two young men walk away, she notices something that disrupts her previous calculations. The decoy prince and his aide seem to be getting along far better than she anticipated. There is a camaraderie there that suggests Conrad is not on the verge of being fired. She realizes she must change her plans if she wants to secure him. Meanwhile, in a secluded corridor, the real Prince Leon and his decoy drop their masks. The decoy prince, actually Conrad, asks Leon about Lady Sylvia, puzzled by her behavior. He reveals that Sylvia has a knack for finding them at compromising moments, having caught Leon in a secret training session that even the real Conrad hadn't seen. Leon wipes his face, his expression contemplative. He wonders if Sylvia is an enemy agent sent by his stepmother to target their weaknesses, or perhaps a spy for a moderate faction. He considers the possibility that she has seen through their switch entirely. However, Leon also notes her character. He observed that she cheered for the loser, and doesn't seem to judge people by rank or appearance, suggesting she has a good heart despite the suspicious timing of her actions. Conrad, the decoy, suggests that the best way to monitor this unpredictable variable is to keep her close. He proposes putting Sylvia on the student council, a powerful body that oversees the school and often holds more authority than the teachers. This would allow them to watch her every move. Back in the garden, Sylvia is embroiled in a petty squabble with Lady Gloriana over a missing hair ornament. Gloriana accuses Sylvia of stealing it, or at least implies it went missing after she showed it to her. Sylvia defends herself, claiming she merely looked at it. The argument is interrupted by the arrival of the decoy prince, who admonishes the ladies for their disgraceful behavior over something so trivial. He suggests that if they wish to argue, they should bring the matter to the student council. The mention of the student council silences the girls. The decoy prince then drops his trap. He invites Sylvia to join the council herself. Sylvia's initial instinct is to refuse, terrified of the proximity to royalty. The other girls whisper that her rank is more than sufficient and that the prince is showing her special favor. The decoy prince presses the advantage, asking for her help specifically to manage the girls' side of the student body. He adds the final, decisive lure. Lord Conrad is also on the student council. Sylvia's resistance crumbles instantly. The terrifying prospect of working with the prince is outweighed by the golden opportunity to work alongside Lord Conrad. She sees this as the perfect maneuver to close the distance. She immediately agrees to the request, shouting, "I'll do it," with an enthusiasm that surprises everyone. The decoy prince smiles, relieved, while the real prince, Leon, stands silently by, observing her reaction. As the two young men walk away, the decoy prince chuckles, noting that Sylvia agreed the moment Lord Conrad was mentioned. Leon tries to brush it off, claiming their answers just happened to line up, but he rubs his neck, looking slightly flustered. Behind them, Sylvia is left clutching her head in despair, screaming internally that she hates getting close to royalty, yet acknowledging that her path to the perfect, submissive husband now runs directly through the student council room. She has walked willingly into the lion's den, driven by a misunderstanding of who the lion actually is. A void of sensory terror, dominated by the monochromatic recollection of a previous demise. A heavy, diagonal blade slices through the visual field, its sharp edge gleaming with a predatory coldness that transcends the barrier of memory. This is the guillotine, the instrument of final judgment, and the sensory memory of its freezing metal kissing the back of the neck remains vivid and inescapable. The darkness surrounding the blade suggests the isolation of the execution scaffold, a place where all hope evaporates. The sensation is not merely visual but tactile. The phantom weight of the steel presses against the skin, resurrecting the precise moment of death where the world faded into an abyss. This traumatic recollection serves as the anchor for the protagonist's current existence, a reminder that her new life is built upon the blood-soaked foundation of a past execution. Lady Sylvia gasps as she tears herself from the grip of the nightmare, her body lunging forward in her bed with such force that the heavy duvet billows outward like a collapsing lung. The sound of her sudden awakening echoes in the opulent room, startling the maid who stands by the window. Her chest heaves, sweat clinging to her brow as she clutches the sheets, grounding herself in the reality of the morning sun rather than the darkness of the scaffold. The maid, adjusting the blinds to let in the morning light, looks over with concern, inquiring if her mistress has suffered another nightmare. Sylvia, composing herself with a trembling hand to her chest, dismisses the terror as a mere bad dream, though her internal monologue reveals the weight of the recurring trauma. She gazes out at the sprawling architecture of the academy, the student council building looming in the distance with its spires piercing the sky, a symbol of the hierarchy she must navigate. It has been a significant amount of time since she first began dreaming of her previous life, yet the memories remain as sharp as the blade that ended it. The realization settles in that reality, with its complex social navigations and hidden dangers, often holds more terror than the nightmares of her execution. The scene shifts to the interior of the student council room, a space suffocated by prestige and expectation. The room is populated by the elite, a body made up of high-ranking, top-performing noble students who stand in rigid formation, their uniforms pressed and their expressions guarded. Sylvia stands among them, her hands clasped tightly before her, feeling the immense pressure of her position. She finds herself in the presence of royalty, observing the figure seated at the president's desk. The dark-haired young man, whom everyone addresses as His Highness, occupies the seat of power with a stiffness that suggests an uneasy burden. The students bow and pledge their loyalty, looking forward to working with him, their voices a chorus of subservience. Sylvia, however, feels the crushing weight of the honor bestowed upon her. Getting into the student council is supposed to be a pinnacle of achievement, yet she feels displaced. The man at the desk, playing the role of the prince, asks for their orders, but his demeanor hints at a performance. Sylvia's attention, however, drifts to the blonde-haired young man standing beside the desk, the one she identifies as Lapdog Conrad, the son of Viscount Shreve. This man, actually Prince Leon in disguise, acts the part of the clumsy subordinate, fumbling with paperwork and presenting misfiled forms to the seated prince. The seated man, actually the real Conrad in disguise, reprimands him for the errors, pointing out multiple mistakes with a tone of command that feels practiced. The blonde man apologizes meekly, his posture slumped in feigned incompetence. Sylvia watches this interaction, her mind racing with the rumors she has heard about Conrad's father, the Shark of the Treasury, a man infamous for ruthlessly slicing the royal budget. She recalls the stories of Conrad taunting the queen about her dress budget, a display of arrogance that seems at odds with the clumsy figure before her. Despite the rumors and his apparent ineptitude, Sylvia finds herself drawn to this Conrad for strategic reasons rooted in her survival instinct. She harbors a deep aversion to royalty, a trauma-induced response to her past execution for marrying a king. To her, the prince represents a path to the guillotine, while Conrad, with his lower status as a viscount's son and his reputation as a lapdog, represents safety. She calculates that he is the undisputed #1 man she could keep under her thumb, a partner whose skills and low status would allow her to live a happy, secure life far from the lethal intrigues of the throne. Her internal narrative reveals a desperate desire to avoid the mistakes of her past life. She seeks a marriage of convenience and control, not romance and ruin. Meanwhile, a silent, frantic communication occurs between the two men at the desk. The blonde man, the true Prince Leon, whispers to his companion, fearing that Sylvia has deduced their identity swap. He notices her intense gaze fixed upon him and interprets it as suspicion. The dark-haired man, the real Conrad, agrees, sweating nervously as he maintains his facade. They believe Sylvia's penetrating stare has pierced through their acting, seeing the brilliance and refinement radiating from the true prince despite his servant's uniform. This misunderstanding creates a layer of comedic tension. Sylvia stares because she wants to manipulate a useful pawn, while the men believe she stares because she recognizes royal majesty. Leon, committed to his disguise, decides to double down on his clumsiness to throw her off the scent. He fumbles with the papers, acting as though he is on the verge of dropping the entire stack, hoping to cement his image as the incompetent aide. Sylvia, however, notices something distinct about his hands. She observes the white gloves he wears, noting that they are ill-fitting and tight, straining against his fingers. To her, this is evidence of his lower status. She reasons that royal gloves are custom-made to perfection, so these poorly fitting ones must be Viscount-level store-bought items. She points this out, asking if they don't fit, inadvertently striking a nerve. Leon flinches, realizing the danger of her observation. The tightness of the gloves is not due to poor tailoring, but because his hands have grown calloused and muscular from intense sword training. He has trained relentlessly to reach the level of the real Conrad, to be a warrior capable of protecting his kingdom, and these calluses are the physical proof of his dedication, proof that would shatter his cover as a soft, pampered noble. He quickly tries to hide his hands, terrified that Sylvia, the one person he desperately wants to avoid noticing his true nature, has zoomed in on the one flaw in his costume. He attempts to deflect, recalling a recent incident where he was almost caught practicing, emphasizing the precarious nature of his double life where there is no mask to simply rip off. The real Conrad, observing this panic, whispers a reminder that he should just ask her directly rather than spiral into anxiety, but Leon remains on edge. The tension in the room shifts as the other student council members engage Sylvia. They welcome her, suggesting she drop the formalities since she is an underclassman, and the conversation turns to the inevitable topic of romance and the future. When asked what she plans to do now that she is on the council, Sylvia answers with blunt honesty, marriage, obviously. This declaration shocks the room. The male students whisper among themselves, misinterpreting her ambition as a desire to become the prince's bride, citing rumors that the prince personally invited her and called her beautiful during sword class. They speculate that his interest in her goes beyond family rank, noting that other noble ladies like Lady Gloriana were bypassed in favor of Sylvia. Sylvia hears these whispers and internally fumes. The idea of being the prince's bride is repugnant to her, equating it to choosing a husband who will get her killed. Her face darkens with a shadow of annoyance as she thinks, schools for studying, rejecting the romantic drama thrust upon her. She is disgusted by the assumption that she is just another noble girl chasing a crown, when in reality, she is chasing survival. The real Conrad, sensing the deteriorating mood and Sylvia's visible discomfort, nudges the disguised prince to intervene and salvage the situation. Leon, adopting his persona, steps forward and asks Sylvia a simple, grounding question. Do you like books, Lady Sylvia? This question acts as a balm to her frayed nerves. Sylvia looks at him, the lapdog Conrad, and feels a wave of gratitude. For the first time since her reincarnation, she feels thankful to a member of the nobility. The atmosphere softens, transitioning from high-stakes political tension to a seemingly peaceful walk on the campus grounds. Leon carries a stack of heavy books for her, walking beside her as they navigate the stone paths. He observes her demeanor, noting that she seems to be enjoying herself, and Sylvia seizes this opportunity to pitch herself to her target. She begins to elaborate on her domestic skills, framing them as preparation for her future husband's sake. She explains her philosophy of frugality, mentioning that saving money is where she shines, a trait she attributes to her commoner past life but frames as modest nobility. Leon, intrigued and charmed, notes that his stepmother also started out modest, finding Sylvia's attitude admirable. He recalls that the real Conrad's father is a budget cutter in the treasury, thinking that Sylvia's mindset would actually fit perfectly with the family she thinks she is targeting. However, Sylvia pushes the narrative too far in her enthusiasm. She proudly reveals that she has started growing vegetables. When Leon politely assumes she buys seedlings, she corrects him with aggressive frugality. She would never waste money on seeds. Instead, she plants the seeds and roots from vegetable scraps that would otherwise be thrown out as trash. Leon stops in his tracks, a giant question mark materializing over his head. He looks at her, bewildered, and asks if she is planning to live in poverty when she marries. The image of a high-ranking noble lady scavenging through kitchen refuse to plant garbage in the garden creates a jarring cognitive dissonance for him. Undeterred, Sylvia continues to list her skills, mentioning that she is learning mending and cleaning tricks, activities that Leon points out are typically the job of a maid, not a future viscountess. Sylvia realizes too late that she has miscalculated. Her perception of normal behavior has been warped by her commoner past life and her desperate desire to appear low maintenance. She stops, panic rising as she wonders if the Viscount's family is actually well off and if her display of extreme poverty is off-putting rather than attractive. She looks around at the other students, noticing their monogrammed embroidery and casual wealth, realizing she has no idea how normal nobles present themselves. She tries to backtrack, stammering that her husband's promotions would be backed by her family's support and that she doesn't plan to be poor. She attempts to salvage the conversation with a romantic platitude, claiming that if there is love, one can handle any environment. This statement triggers a moment of introspection. Sylvia falls silent, her eyes losing focus as she reflects on the concept of love. She admits to herself that in her past life, she was more in love with the idea of love itself than the reality of it. She married, yes, but looking back, she wonders if she ever actually experienced love in the real sense, or if it was just a role she played until the curtains closed with a blade. Leon notices her sudden silence and the melancholy that settles over her features. He watches her, puzzled by the complex depths of this girl who oscillates between aggressive vegetable farming and profound sorrow. Their introspective moment is shattered by a sharp cry from nearby, a scream that rips through the campus air. Kate! Leon's head snaps toward the sound. His instinct as a protector flares, but he immediately checks himself. He is currently hiding his identity. Getting involved in trouble would be a tactical error that could expose him. He hesitates, torn between his duty and his disguise. Sylvia, however, does not hesitate. Upon hearing the commotion and recognizing the voice, she bolts toward the source of the noise. Leon calls out to her, "Lady Sylvia," but she is already running. Cursing under his breath, he abandons his caution and sprints after her, declaring he will go check the situation. The scene they stumble upon is chaotic and violent. In a clearing, a large, burly man, the school's gardener, is brandishing a pair of massive, sharp gardening shears, advancing on two terrified female students who are cowering on the ground. The gardener's face is twisted with rage, his grip on the shears white-knuckled. Sylvia rushes in, placing herself between the attacker and the girls, her arms spread in a protective barrier. She recognizes the man immediately as the school's gardener. The gardener snaps at her to shut up, his anger unhinged. Sylvia's mind races, piecing together the context. She had come to the gardener's shed earlier looking for a lost hair ornament. There, she had found not just her ornament, but a whole pile of accessories that looked like they belonged to other students, stolen goods hoard hidden away. This man is not just a gardener, he is a thief who has been preying on the students, and now that he has been discovered, his cornered aggression has turned lethal. The gardener raises the shears, the metal glinting with a menace that Sylvia knows too well. He emits a palpable, killing intent, a psychic pressure that washes over Sylvia, freezing her blood. This sensation paralyzes her. It is not just fear of the current weapon. It is a sensory trigger that instantly transports her back to the scaffold. The glint of the shears overlaps with the glint of the guillotine blade. Her body locks up, unable to move, trapped in the amber of her trauma. Flashbacks flood her vision. She sees the jeering crowd from her execution, the faces of people she used to be close to now twisted in hatred, shouting that she is a disgrace. She hears the accusations of adultery and the collective judgment of a town that turned on her. The pain of that betrayal, the realization that the people she loved wanted her dead, hurts more than the physical threat. The gardener's voice merges with the crowd, shouting that she got too full of herself, mirroring the condemnations of her past life. In the present, the gardener lunges, the shears descending in a deadly arc. Sylvia, immobilized by the superimposition of past and present death, can only stand there, shielding the girls with her frozen body. The girls behind her scream, "Lady Sylvia! Please stay with me!" But Sylvia is lost in the echo of her own death. Just as the blade threatens to connect, a blur of motion intercepts the attack. Leon, abandoning all pretense of clumsy incompetence, flies into the frame. With a fluid, powerful motion, he delivers a devastating kick to the gardener's face. The impact is brutal and decisive. The gardener is sent flying backward, the shears clattering uselessly to the ground. Leon lands, his posture radiating the lethal grace of a trained warrior, standing as the shield that Sylvia needed in her past life but never had. The cycle of the guillotine is broken by the heel of a prince disguised as a servant, saving Sylvia not just from the shears, but from the paralyzing grip of her own history. The tranquility of the garden. A man with wild, desperate eyes lunges forward, his face contorted in a rictus of maniacal rage as he screams, branding a young woman a little brat. The target of this sudden assault is Lady Sylvia, who finds herself sprawled upon the earth, vulnerable and exposed to the assailant's fury. However, the strike never lands. A figure interposes himself between the attacker and the noblewoman with lightning speed. It is Conrad, the blonde-haired young man, who stands firm, his posture radiating a calm but deadly proficiency. He gazes down at the assailant now crumpled on the grass, offering a chillingly casual explanation for the violence that just occurred. His foot, he claims, simply happened to hit someone. The absurdity of the statement clashes with the gravity of the situation, as he calls the attacker sick, with a sneer of disdain. The chapter opens with this juxtaposition of lethal skill and feigned incompetence. The gardener, sprawling on the ground, gasps in pain and confusion. The narrative focus shifts to the microsecond of the interception. Conrad's hand had not merely blocked the attack, it had caught the blade itself. He stares at his gloved hand, noting with a detached curiosity that his fingers just happened to catch the blade, reiterating the word sick, as if disgusted by the lack of hygiene or the crudeness of the weapon rather than the danger posed. The gardener, trembling, stares at his own weapon, a pair of heavy garden shears, and stammers, realizing his attack was neutralized by a bare hand. The sheer force of the block resonates in the gardener's memory. He recalls throwing up his hand to defend himself, only to be overwhelmed by a blinding flash of impact and superior strength. The visual narrative fragments into jagged recollections of the event. A burst of light signifies the collision of forces, followed by the gardener's face, pale and beaded with sweat, eyes wide with the terror of a man who realizes he has attacked a predator far more dangerous than himself. In the immediate aftermath, another young woman rushes to Lady Sylvia's side, clutching her shoulders and frantically asking if she is okay. Sylvia sits on the grass, her expression blank, her mind struggling to process the rapid sequence of events. The narrator notes that while she appears shocked, she remains conscious, her wide eyes staring into the middle distance as the adrenaline begins to fade. The gardener, now subdued and kneeling in a posture of defeat, looks on as Conrad walks away, his back turned to the threat he has already neutralized. The dialogue reveals the complexity of the gardener's motivation, or lack thereof. There is talk of no choice, suggesting coercion or a desperate situation that forced his hand. The gardener's internal monologue, or perhaps the whispers of the town, bleed into the scene. He speaks of the closeness of the community, of how if the nobles had protected him, they too would face execution. The weight of expectation hangs heavy. Being chosen by the king to serve in the palace was the whole town's pride, a burden that seemingly crushed his moral compass. He repeats the mantra that they didn't have a choice, a hollow justification for the attempted violence against a young girl. Sylvia, still dazed, finally focuses her gaze. She murmurs a name, Vaya, before her vision clears enough to recognize the figure looming over her. It is Conrad, his face etched with concern now that the immediate danger has passed. He leans in, his brows furrowed, calling out to her softly, "My lady?" The transition from the violence of the attack to this moment of intimate concern snaps Sylvia back to reality. She blinks, confirming that she has come to, and identifies her savior as Lord Conrad. The scene widens to reveal the arrival of the palace guards, who swarm the area too late to be of use but in time to secure the perimeter. They restrain the gardener, binding his hands behind his back. Conrad, ever the actor, maintains his facade. He loudly explains to the gathered crowd that his foot just happened to connect at the right moment, framing the calculated takedown as a clumsy stroke of luck. Guards shout orders, securing the scene, while Sylvia watches the chaos unfold. Her mind reels, questioning reality itself. She wonders if this is a dream, questioning if her fear was so great that she began hallucinating in broad daylight. Her heart pounds, the sound filling her ears, her cheeks flushing as the adrenaline creates a physiological storm within her. Conrad, standing near her, mutters that they got lucky, a statement that carries a double meaning: lucky they survived, or lucky his true skills were not exposed to the public eye. A realization dawns on Sylvia, shattering her confusion. She replays the sensation of the rescue in her mind. It was not a hallucination, it was physical. It was Lord Conrad's hand that had shielded her. She looks up at him, tears welling in her large, expressive eyes. Conrad, noticing her distress, drops to one knee, panic flashing across his features as he stammers her name. Sylvia, however, is not crying from fear, but from overwhelming relief. Thank God, she thinks, clutching her chest. She focuses on the tactile memory of the rescue. The hand that grabbed the shears was warm. This warmth serves as a grounding anchor for her. It signifies a profound shift in her worldview. In her internal monologue, she acknowledges a past existence, past life, where perhaps she was alone or unprotected. But here, in this reality, there are people who'll save me. The realization brings a flood of emotion, affirming that she is not alone. The narrative shifts to the explanation of the crime, providing context to the gardener's madness. It is revealed that the gardener had a habit of theft. He would take items, pawn them with the intention of borrowing the money, and planned to put them back later. This behavior was enabled by the negligence of the nobility. Nobody filed lost item reports, so the missing goods just kept piling up without consequence. What started as simply forgetting to return items he had picked up evolved into a compulsive habit. Later, inside the opulent corridors of the palace, the dark-haired prince walks alongside Conrad. The prince comments on the incident, noting the rumor of a huge incident involving the security office. He observes Sylvia walking ahead of them, noting her resilience. He finds it really weird that she can speak so casually after nearly getting killed. Sylvia, sensing eyes on her, moves quietly through the hall. Conrad offers a deeper insight into the gardener's psychology to the prince. He explains that once the gardener got a taste for it, it became a habit. The culture of the nobility played a role. Nobles think that turning in lost items is embarrassing, creating a loophole that the gardener exploited. Conrad, showing a moment of empathy or perhaps projection, notes that everyone has moments where temptation wins, almost feeling bad for the thief. The conversation turns personal between Sylvia and Conrad in a quiet corner of the garden or a hallway. Conrad explains his desire for anonymity regarding the rescue. He insists that it would be embarrassing for Lady Sylvia if people knew she was rescued by him. He resolves to keep his presence at the scene quiet from the council. His reasoning is self-deprecating. He views himself as Conrad the lapdog and believes that claiming credit for a heroic rescue would only make his life harder, as nobody would believe it anyway. He laughs it off with a hollow, ha ha ha, trying to maintain his mask of mediocrity. Sylvia, however, pierces through his defense. She reaches out and squeezes his hand, stopping his self-effacing laughter. She looks him in the eye, her expression serious and unwavering. She asserts that he could only save her because of his daily training. She acknowledges the effort behind the luck. Conrad flinches, trying to pull his hand away. He apologizes, claiming his hands are not very nice to look at. He tries to excuse the rough state of his skin by claiming the glove ripped when he grabbed the shears, which is why they look damaged. He is self-conscious about the calluses and scars, evidence of rigorous work that contradicts his lapdog persona. Sylvia refuses to let him hide. She holds his hand tighter, declaring firmly, "No, they're very good hands." Conrad is stunned, a blush creeping up his neck. He tries to deflect, stammering that he has done all this work and still haven't mastered anything. But Sylvia interrupts his self-doubt. She smiles, a genuine, radiant expression, and tells him, "I think the way you work so hard is wonderful, Lord Conrad." The validation hits Conrad like a physical blow. He is left speechless. Realizing she has overstepped the bounds of propriety, Sylvia suddenly recoils, apologizing for grabbing a gentleman's hand so boldly. She pulls back, leaving Conrad staring at his hand, the warmth of her touch lingering. The scene transitions to the prince's quarters. The prince, a sharp-eyed young man with dark hair, leans against a window frame, teasing Conrad. He asks if Conrad has a girl you like in class, or if he's excited about the school trip. Conrad, walking into the room, tries to shut down the line of questioning immediately, stating, "We're not having that conversation. I tell you this every time." The prince, undeterred and clearly enjoying himself, presses on. He deduces that Conrad is there to talk romance, and that Lady Sylvia must have turned out to be a wonderful woman. Conrad sighs, exasperated, reminding the prince that while this is technically the prince's room, they cannot have royalty sleeping in the servant quarters, so Conrad often takes the prince's place for safety. The mood shifts from playful banter to serious strategy. The prince questions the background check on the gardener. He asks if they double-check the man's history. His aide confirms they are sure. The prince's eyes narrow coldly. He states that if the man were his aide, he would have fired him for such a lapse. The aide, sweating, agrees nervously. The prince reveals his cynical nature. "If it were me, I'd absolutely use any weakness I could find." He finds it suspicious that a gardener who worked there for over 20 years suddenly snapped, yet they found no ties to the enemy or the queen. Conrad, who has been listening silently, is called out by the prince. The prince then dissects Conrad's actions during the attack. He notes that despite the accident cover story, Conrad jumped in to help without thinking. Furthermore, he points out that Sylvia was sharp enough to notice the calluses on Conrad's hands. This observation intrigues the prince. He muses that Sylvia is a strange woman, one with a beautiful heart who sees people's true nature. He contrasts this with his own cynical view. He recalls Sylvia's smile and her words about valuing hard work. He admits she is not a bad person. The prince makes a decision. With a thoughtful, almost predatory look that Conrad notes he has never seen before, the prince decides it could be interesting to keep an eye on Sylvia for a while. Conrad observes this shift in the prince's demeanor with a mix of surprise and wariness. The narrative jumps to Sylvia's private chambers. She lies in bed, a wet cloth on her forehead, insisting, "I don't have a fever." Her maid, hovering anxiously, counters that having a gardener point shears at her is more than enough shock to bring on a fever. Sylvia argues that her body is just a little warm, but the maid retorts that that's exactly what we call a fever. Sylvia pulls the covers up to her nose, hiding her face. In the privacy of her mind, she admits the truth. It isn't a sickness in the traditional sense. She clutches the hand that Conrad held, remembering the sensation. It's hot, or rather warmth. Her face erupts in a blush, the sound effect, "Gah," illustrating her sudden fluster. She chides herself for being so bold with a man. The memory of the rescue is visceral. She closes her eyes, thinking, "This warmth. I hope it doesn't fade." There is a deep, resonating psychological comfort in that warmth, a safety she hasn't felt before. She doesn't fully understand why, but that contact has anchored her. Time passes, and Sylvia returns to the academy. The setting shifts to a school environment with Gothic architecture. Her friends surround her, expressing concern. One asks if she is okay, calling her a top student, and assuring her she'll be fine. Sylvia plays it cool, saying she can't exactly miss class. The students discuss this serious incident and how furious His Highness, the prince, was. Then the gossip turns to Conrad. A student mentions that lapdog who was with you ran off. The rumor mill has distorted the events. They believe Conrad fled in cowardice, leaving the prince angry. Sylvia listens, knowing the truth, that Conrad didn't run, but rather stood his ground and saved her. She realizes this is part of the cover-up Conrad wanted. So that's how it is, she thinks. He allowed his reputation to take a hit to maintain his low profile and protect her dignity. She decides to keep his secret, acknowledging that it might be better not to clear this up. She accepts the narrative that Conrad ran off, even though it pains her, because revealing he saved her might be embarrassing or complicate matters with the council. However, Sylvia's internal monologue reveals her true frustration. She thinks, "I've been kind of off these last few days." She visualizes her plan crumbling. In a mental diagram, she outlines her original strategy: angry prince equals dismissal. Then she would comfort the heartbroken Lord Conrad, which would lead to marriage. This schematic of romance and political maneuvering is her roadmap, but the reality is diverging from the plan. The prince is interested, not dismissive, and Conrad is not heartbroken in the way she needs him to be for her comfort tactic to work. She thinks, then it's not going according to my plan. Her contemplation is interrupted by a voice calling her name. "Lady Sylvia." She turns to see a formidable figure approaching. It is Lady Gloriana, flanked by her entourage. She holds a fan, her expression unreadable but imposing. "Do you have a moment to talk?" Gloriana asks. Sylvia looks up, surprised, recognizing the newcomer as a potential new variable in her already complicating life. The chapter concludes with this new confrontation looming, leaving Sylvia's plans for a quiet romance with her lapdog further in jeopardy. The opulent, high-ceilinged corridors of the academy, where light streams through arched windows to illuminate a tense confrontation between noblewomen. Lady Gloriana, the daughter of a marquis and a woman of equal rank to Sylvia, dominates the space with her imposing presence, her face partially obscured by a dark, lace-trimmed fan held elegantly in her gloved hand. Other students whisper in the background, their eyes wide with speculation, noting that Gloriana aims to become the queen and views Sylvia as a direct competitor for the crown. Sylvia, however, recoils internally from this assumption, harboring no desire to compete with anyone, let alone for such a dangerous position. The tension hangs heavy as Gloriana lowers her fan, her gaze piercing, and requests a moment of Lady Sylvia's time. Sylvia, attempting to deflect the intensity of the situation, assumes Gloriana seeks the prince and promptly informs her that His Highness is not present. Sylvia's internal reasoning reveals a traumatic motivation rooted in a previous existence. She recalls her past life where she married into the royal family, a decision that ultimately cost her her head. The memory of the guillotine looms over her psyche, driving her current ambition to hand His Highness over to Lady Gloriana and secure her own safety. In her mind's eye, she envisions a snapping sound, symbolizing the severance of her doom, and focuses her desires on a different target entirely, Lord Conrad, the prince's aide. She idealizes him not for his power, but for his lack of it, viewing the plain, forgettable third son of a viscount as the perfect candidate for a husband she can order around in peace, far removed from the lethal intrigues of the throne. The atmosphere shifts abruptly as Gloriana, rather than issuing a challenge, bows deeply and sincerely, her intricate ringlets cascading forward as she thanks Sylvia for helping one of her people. Sylvia blinks in confusion, her guard dropping as she stammers that she did nothing special, merely stepping in between a conflict. Gloriana clarifies that Sylvia intervened when a groundskeeper nearly assaulted a girl the other day, identifying the victim as one of her own subordinates. With a resolute expression, Gloriana declares that they are now even, her sense of noble obligation satisfied. Sylvia watches Gloriana depart, her cheeks flushed with realization as she acknowledges the sharpness of the other woman's character. She notes that while Gloriana remains as prickly as ever, the depth of her bow, perfect in form, betrays a rigid adherence to duty and gratitude that Sylvia had not anticipated. As Gloriana walks away, intent on finding His Highness, Sylvia reflects on the advice Gloriana had offered, that for a noble, connections are everything and one should choose their friends more carefully. The words resonate with Sylvia, validating her assessment that Gloriana possesses the discernment necessary for a ruler. Visualizing Gloriana in the regalia of a queen, holding the scales of justice, Sylvia grows convinced that her rival is indeed the one who would make a good monarch. She watches the retreating figures of the students, her mind racing with schemes to facilitate a union between Gloriana and the prince. If such a match occurred, Sylvia calculates, she would be free to focus her romantic efforts on Lord Conrad without the looming threat of execution. The shadow of her past death resurfaces, a dark, crouching figure in her memory, reminding her that she was innocent yet still faced the blade. Determined to avoid a repeat of that ridiculous execution, she resolves to remove herself from the path of royalty entirely. The narrative transitions to the preparations for the Student Council's upcoming event, a tea party designed to foster socialization among the students. Sylvia, however, finds the concept of a standard tea party mundane and envisions a twist to engineer the interactions she desires. While she plots, she observes Lord Conrad in the background, noting his diligent, silent work ethic as he handles tasks with the efficiency of a maid and without a single complaint. To Sylvia, this reinforces his suitability as a husband she can dominate. She pities him as a noble from the countryside barely clinging to the capital, demoted to cleaning duty due to perceived uselessness. She watches him with a predatory gaze, mentally claiming him as the perfect man to boss around. Her reverie interrupts when she accidentally collides with a stack of materials, the sound of the impact drawing attention. A voice calls out, questioning the timing of her staring at Lord Conrad, snapping her back to the reality of her duties. Sylvia swiftly recovers, announcing that she has devised a little twist for the tea party, her mind already whirling with the mechanics of her scheme. Later, Lord Conrad enters the room where Sylvia is working, surprised to find her amidst a mountain of supplies. He explains that His Highness sent him to help, but upon surveying the room, he remarks that she seems to have handled everything already. He asks if other council members assisted her in carrying the heavy loads, to which a bystander softly interjects that Sylvia carried everything herself, revealing a physical capability that contrasts with her delicate appearance. Sylvia, unfazed, declares that they will need all the help they can get, directing attention to the map of the academy she has prepared. Sylvia unveils her plan, a school-wide quiz rally. She details the logistics, explaining that quiz stations are scattered around the academy grounds. The difficulty curves based on proximity, Closer stations present harder questions, while those farther away offer easier challenges. She instructs Conrad to manage the map while she handles the quiz questions, establishing a division of labor that keeps her in control of the event structure. The core mechanic involves couples drawing lots to determine their partners and the order of stations they must visit, competing based on accuracy and time. On the day of the event, students gather in the courtyard, buzzing with anticipation and confusion over the map. Sylvia announces that they will be formed into mixed pairs, a declaration that elicits gasps and blushes from the crowd. She reflects internally that in her past life, such extravagant ideas labeled her a spendthrift, but she defends the concept by recalling how she watched her mother organize similar events. She assures those already engaged that separate tea party seating is available, ensuring no social faux pas occur. Lord Conrad stands beside her, expressing mild disbelief that she conceived the entire plan, though he admits that simply watching the proceedings looks fun. A student points out an unmarked area on the map, prompting Sylvia to explain with a bright smile that it is a bonus route, where participants receive full points simply for traversing it. The students' reactions turn to horror as they realize the route leads through the academy's rumored haunted spot, where a ghost is said to appear. Screams erupt from the crowd, but Sylvia spins the narrative, suggesting it is a chance for the gentlemen to prove their bravery and for the ladies to cling to their partners. A female student expresses concern, but another encourages her to join, arguing that since their engagements are often arranged by parents, it is vital to meet different people and decide for oneself. She warns ominously that marrying the wrong person could literally lead to execution, a specific fear that resonates deeply with Sylvia, though the student likely means something metaphorical like domestic misery. The lottery begins, and Sylvia reveals the true depth of her machinations in her internal monologue. She did not plan this event merely for student enjoyment. She rigged the draw to guarantee specific pairings. Using a double-layered lottery box, she manipulates the outcome to ensure Lady Gloriana and His Highness end up together. The box, labeled with deceptive innocence, contains a hidden mechanism she activates as the prince approaches. She hands the box to His Highness, urging him to draw when ready, her heart pounding with the thrill of her subterfuge. As the prince reaches into the box, Sylvia acknowledges her own awfulness, admitting to herself that she is sending a classmate into the terrifying arms of the royal family solely to save her own skin. The prince draws his lot, and the attention shifts to Lady Gloriana. A student urges Gloriana to draw as well, but the noblewoman hesitates, her face flushed and her demeanor anxious. She attempts to pass, citing that her high rank might cause problems for her partner, but onlookers interpret her hesitation as deep love and nervousness before the prince. The tension snaps as the prince reveals his lot, announcing that he is paired with Lady Gloriana. Gloriana reacts with a physical jolt, her body stiffening as if struck, and she stammers in shock. Her movement is robotic, described with mechanical sound effects as she turns toward the prince, trembling visibly. The crowd whispers that she must be incredibly nervous standing in front of His Highness, misinterpreting her sheer terror for romantic fluster. Sylvia, watching from the sidelines, mentally urges Gloriana to pull herself together, pinning all her hopes on the success of this manufactured couple. With the main couple dispatched, the event proceeds. A student notices that Sylvia, the organizer, and Lord Conrad are the only ones left without partners. He teases Conrad, asking if there are no ladies he wishes to walk with, to which Conrad replies with a self-deprecating laugh that no woman would want to be paired with him. Sylvia seizes this opportunity, declaring that as the organizer, she will join him, ostensibly to tally points but secretly celebrating the success of her plan. She views this as the ultimate victory, stopping Conrad from joining anyone else and securing him for herself. As they begin their walk, Sylvia feels a wave of relief, interpreting Conrad's earlier "phew" as a shared sentiment of escaping the chaos. However, Conrad challenges her interpretation, suggesting that his relief stems from a deeper place, hinting at a complexity Sylvia has yet to fully grasp. They walk together through the academy grounds, Sylvia mentally celebrating that she finally has alone time with her intended target, having been too busy rigging the draw earlier to focus on him. She clutches her chest, feeling that she hasn't been herself lately, attributing the sensation to the stress of the event. The conversation takes a serious turn when Conrad brings up the topic of His Highness. He points out that Sylvia is high-ranking enough to be a candidate for queen. He notes that although the prince ended up with Lady Gloriana this time, events like this offer opportunities for Sylvia as well. Sylvia, panicked by the suggestion that she could still be in the running for the throne, vehemently denies it with a shouted "No" that echoes with desperation. Conrad looks at her, perplexed by the intensity of her refusal. Conrad presses on, observing that many girls were obviously hoping for His Highness, and conversely, many guys seem to want to be paired with Lady Sylvia. He asks her if she realizes this, his tone shifting to something more probing. Sylvia, cornered and desperate to squash any notion of a royal future, declares with absolute finality that she refuses anything involving the royal family. She escalates her rejection, stating she wouldn't get involved with the prince even if it killed her, explicitly emphasizing especially his highness. Silence descends upon the pair. Sylvia realizes too late the gravity of her words. She has just told the prince's closest aide that she would rather die than be with his master. Her mind screams, treason, as she comprehends the political suicide she just committed. She scrambles to backpedal, stammering that she meant she isn't queen material, and that life in the royal family seems suffocating. She tries to soften the blow by acknowledging that the prince is her childhood friend who often covers for her mistakes, but the damage is done. She glances nervously at Conrad, asking if he is angry. Conrad's expression has darkened. He looks away, his demeanor cold and distant. Sylvia interprets his reaction as anger on behalf of his master, believing he is offended because she basically rejected the prince. She apologizes profusely, trembling with the fear that she has alienated the very man she intended to marry, unaware that his reaction might stem from a more personal source than mere loyalty to the crown. The chapter concludes with Sylvia terrified that she has ruined her chances with the plain Lord Conrad, leaving them in a state of unresolved tension. The academy grounds shift from the bustling courtyard to the quiet, dappled sunlight of the forest path, where the rhythmic crunch of footsteps marks the passage of two figures. Here walks His Highness the Prince, currently masquerading as his own attendant, Lord Conrad, moving in step with Lady Sylvia. The prince, hidden behind the guise of a lower noble, harbors internal conflict. He persists in doubting the true nature of Lady Sylvia, questioning the kind-hearted persona she projects. Due to the frantic preparations for the student council event, the two have found little opportunity for private conversation until this moment. Sylvia breaks the silence, requesting that Lord Conrad bring the map closer, her voice slicing through his contemplation. He complies with a curt, okay, but his gaze lingers on her, intense and analyzing. Internally, the disguised prince wonders how his counterpart, the real Conrad, who is currently impersonating Prince Leon, is faring with Lady Gloriana. Unbeknownst to him, Sylvia's mind is far less romantic. She is entirely focused on the mechanics of her scheme, mentally confirming that she is in the midst of rigging the lottery to ensure her desired outcomes. Meanwhile, in a different sector of the academy grounds, the prince, in reality, the attendant Conrad, struggles under the weight of his disguise. He feels the crushing pressure of his duty, steeling himself to maintain the charade for the sake of his master. Lady Gloriana, walking beside him with a heavy flush on her cheeks, attempts to bridge the emotional distance. She timidly brings up a shared memory, recalling that they met at the castle when they were merely children. Her voice trembles as she asks if His Highness remembers her at all. The imposter prince stammers, caught off guard by the direct question. He realizes with a jolt of panic that while he is playing the role of the prince, the specific childhood memories Gloriana refers to belong to the actual Prince Leon, not to him. He faces a dilemma of identity. Does her question apply to the role he is playing, or the person he actually is? In his mind, he visualizes the stark difference between his own childhood self, a humble attendant holding a stick, and the radiant, young Prince Leon. They were always together, yet their worlds were distinct. Forced to answer, the real Conrad adopts a mask of polite ignorance, stating flatly that he does not remember. Gloriana's face falls, her hope deflating visibly at the rejection. Internally, Conrad berates himself, realizing he should have remained silent rather than risking a slip-up or causing her pain. He attempts to pivot the conversation to their surroundings, noting the dim patch of forest behind the old school building. He identifies it as the Academy's renowned haunted spot. Trying to affect a tone of royal bravado, he dismisses the location, asserting that compared to the intrigues of the palace, there is nothing here to fear. He critiques school ghost stories as inherently lame. However, his dismissal is cut short by a piercing shriek. Gloriana screams, pointing with a trembling hand toward the trees where she claims to see a white figure. In her terror, she loses her footing on the uneven ground. The sound of her slipping echoes through the woods as the prince reacts with shock. The narrative focus snaps back to the primary couple, Sylvia and the disguised Prince Leon. Silence hangs heavy between them, thick with unsaid words. The prince, still playing Conrad, glares at the table in front of him, desperate for something to shatter the suffocating tension. Sylvia, trembling slightly, misinterprets his silence as anger. She stands beside him, clutching her hands to her chest, lamenting that she finally secured a chance to be alone with Conrad, only for the mood to turn disastrous. She is convinced he is definitely mad. In reality, the disguised prince is merely socially inept in this context. He struggles to formulate a single decent sentence to initiate conversation. He acknowledges his skill at brushing people off, a talent honed by royalty, but finds himself weaponless when trying to engage someone genuinely. His mind races for a topic, absurdly wishing for a meteor to drop from the sky just to create a distraction. He questions his own earlier behavior, wondering if he appeared annoyed previously. Suddenly, he notices movement in the distance. He calls out Khan, before correcting himself to Your Highness, as the other pair emerges from the woods. The prince, Conrad, walks stiffly, while Gloriana is nowhere to be seen walking beside him. Sylvia immediately scans the area, asking frantically about Lady Gloriana's whereabouts. She notes that they have returned awfully fast, which disrupts her calculated timeline for the event. The disguised Conrad explains vaguely that Gloriana twisted her ankle on the way. Sylvia's expression freezes. This development is not good for her plans. The prince admits that while the injury shouldn't be serious, Gloriana fainted from the shock and the alleged ghost sighting. Sylvia's internal narration reveals the depth of her anxiety. She fears that if she, the villainess of her own story, appears before Gloriana now, the delicate noblewoman might faint all over again. Yet, her pragmatic side takes over. She feels compelled to go to the infirmary to verify Gloriana's condition personally. She worries that the students who carried Gloriana might have handled her roughly and broken something. She is genuinely baffled by Gloriana's fragility, unable to comprehend passing out from a mere twisted ankle. The real Conrad, still posing as the prince, suggests that some of Gloriana's friends have already transported her to the infirmary. He reassures Sylvia that everything is likely fine. However, the disguised Prince Leon intervenes, questioning the propriety of visiting a lady while she is resting. He declares that since the prince is back, he, Conrad, is suddenly free from his duties. Sylvia stares blankly, her mind reeling. She questions the purpose of all her planning if the target couple has separated so quickly. She desperately wanted Gloriana to hold out a little longer to cement the bond with the prince. The disguised Prince Leon, however, sees a golden opportunity. A glint appears in his eye as he formulates a new mission. He perceives this as the perfect chance to push the prince, Conrad, and Gloriana closer together by removing the third wheel, Sylvia, and simultaneously securing time for himself with her. He suggests that since he is free, he and Sylvia should run the course together. Sylvia attempts to decline, citing her responsibility as an event organizer who already knows all the answers. She argues that they cannot participate in the event they are running. The prince counters smoothly, suggesting they can simply add the time to their quiz scores later. He points out that there is one place on the map without any questions, a route that requires no prior knowledge to navigate. He refers to the bonus route, the Academy's haunted spot. Sylvia freezes, gloom descending over her features. She reveals to the audience the true reason she didn't join the event initially: she is terrible with ghosts. She laments that Conrad, Leon, is so sharp that he noticed the imbalance in the course design where she had initially removed the haunted route entirely. Sylvia's fear is irrational but potent. Despite having a past life and technically being a reincarnated soul herself, ghosts still terrify her. She finds them creepy for no rational reason. The disguised prince, noticing her hesitation, asks directly if she is afraid of ghosts. He leans in, wondering if this vulnerability is his chance to make amends for the awkwardness earlier. He hypothesizes that if she gets scared, she might find his protection cute. Sylvia, however, refuses to show weakness to the man she intends to dominate. She straightens her posture and lies through her teeth, claiming she is not afraid at all. She boasts that she is quite good with ghosts and deals with them regularly. As soon as the words leave her mouth, she regrets the absurdity of the lie, realizing how rude it sounds to claim one deals with spirits. She wishes she had just admitted her fear. The prince offers her an out, suggesting they skip the route if she is afraid, but her pride forces her forward. They enter the wooded path. The atmosphere is tense. Suddenly, a white shape bursts from the undergrowth. Sylvia screams, "Eek," and flinches violently. It is just a bird, as the prince calmly points out, but Sylvia's reaction is primal. She hurls herself at him, burying her face in his chest. For a split second, the prince is stunned by the impact. He registers the sensation of her chest pressing against his face erupting in a blush as he thinks, her chest. He tries to steady her, but Sylvia, realizing her loss of composure, panics. In a reflex action born of embarrassment and terror, she lashes out. Slap. The sound rings through the clearing. Sylvia has slapped the prince across the face. She immediately recoils, horrified by her action. She stammers a frantic apology to Sir Conrad, trembling with the realization that she has assaulted the man she wants to marry. She turns and flees, her mind screaming that the event is over for them. In her state of total mortification, she decides she is afraid of nothing anymore. Social death is far worse than any ghost. Sylvia retreats to the safety of the indoors, changing her outfit to regain some semblance of dignity. She encounters Baroness Elena, the scissor man enthusiast who had panicked previously. Elena seems to have strengthened her nerve, declaring the scissor man so cool and seemingly cured of her fear. Sylvia observes this transformation with a detached sense of irony. The narrative then dives into the lore of the ghost. Students discuss the legend. It is the ghost of the queen who died 200 years ago. They confirm she was a commoner-born queen executed by the king. Sylvia, overhearing this, screams internally, "That's anything." The ghost haunting the academy is none other than the spirit of her past self. She reveals that until now, she had been too scared to look into the details of the haunting, but the pieces fit perfectly. She recalls that she was framed in her past life, so it makes perfect logical sense that her restless spirit would haunt the location. The irony that she is terrified of her own ghost is not lost on the narrative, but it does nothing to quell her fear. The event concludes, and reports indicate it was a huge success. But for Sylvia, found kneeling on the floor of a storage room amidst scattered papers, it was a disaster. She feels she has made a complete fool of herself in front of a man. She laughs dryly, a broken foo escaping her lips. She declares that it is all over for her. A voice interrupts her despair. Over. Sylvia looks up to see the disguised prince standing in the doorway. He looks disheveled and anxious. He questions her fatalistic outlook, reminding her that she previously claimed talking to all kinds of men was important, implying that messing up with one person shouldn't be the end of the world. Sylvia counters passionately, yelling that one person is the problem. She confesses, her face burning bright red, that the only man she wants to marry is Sir Conrad. She explains that being seen in such a disgraceful state by him specifically is what makes it a catastrophe. The prince is stunned. He blushes violently, his heart pounding in his chest. He stammers, repeating the word, "Marriage? With me?" as if unable to process the concept. He explains that he came to apologize for brushing her hand away earlier, a misunderstanding on his part, as he thought he had offended her then. Sylvia, realizing she has just blurted out a marriage proposal, tries to backpedal. She claims it was a slip of the tongue. But then, in a moment of reckless honesty, she corrects herself. She admits it wasn't a slip. She tries to be honest about her feelings. The prince, however, is overwhelmed. He looks away, his expression conflicted and shy. He states, "Right now I just can't think about marriage or anything like that." Sylvia interprets this as a definitive rejection. The sound, tap tap tap, echoes her breaking heart. She freezes, processing the words. Rejected, she thinks. She believes she has been turned down by Conrad. But Sylvia is not a woman who accepts defeat easily. Her despair transmutes instantly into scheming determination. She begins to pace the room. She decides that if the man won't budge, she will work on the people around him. She plans to attend social functions and gather information. She considers greasing the wheels with her father and Viscount Schlieb. She recalls that a Waterford family gathering is coming up. She sees this as the perfect venue to showcase our assets. With a sinister foo-foo, she rises from her knees. She declares internally that she would never give up over something this small. Meanwhile, outside the room, the real Prince Leon walks away, clutching his chest. He is not rejecting her out of lack of interest. He is rejecting the concept because he is currently pretending to be someone else. He mutters an apology to the air, citing that his chest still hurts from the impact of her tackle. He realizes he needs overnight permission from the dorm to recover from the emotional and physical toll of the day. He laments that he came to help, but the situation has become incredibly awkward. He sighs, acknowledging he has so much to do, leaving the misunderstanding to fester between them.